everybody. Welcome to the Modern Merchant Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie McCarthy. I'm the head of strategic accounts at Flxpoint. And today we have a pretty exciting guest on. One of my friends and colleagues. He's the chief architect of Flxpoint, Cat Dad, a kiteboard connoisseur, probably won best hair in his high school superlatives. We've got Brad Hamilton with us today.
Hey,
what's up, Brad?
Glad to be here. Nice to see you, Jamie.
Awesome. So I'm really excited that you decided to come on because I just feel like in general, Brad's always just like a fun person to talk to about literally anything. We're not going to talk about literally any and everything today, though. Today, we're really going to be focusing on SaaS product growth and development and kind of like what that means in Brad's role at Flxpoint. But kind of like before we dug into that, Brad, obviously I want to talk about you a little bit, but I also kind of want to talk about like the history of Flxpoint and kind of like our origin story, because I feel like that's super important when we're talking about growth, we're talking about development, right? So I think it was like back in 2017 is when I started with Inventory Source. That's our sister company. It's where I met Brad and our now CTO, Matt. And I just remember like coming to you guys about like certain like feature questions and, just I came to you guys for a lot of things, but mainly kind of like the sort of like overall, like overwhelming response to these like really like specific like feature requests or questions I had was always like, we're going to figure that out in DMX. We're going to
the original naming was DMX. That was before we had a product name. That was the only way we need to refer to this new system that ultimately we wanted to build.
Yeah. So like when Flxpoint was still just like a concept and not an actual thing yet, it was DMX. And so I just remember from like day one, just hearing that, just being like, what the hell is DMX? Like, what is this? So
that was the pie in the sky kind of dream that it was everything that Inventory Source couldn't be, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to kind of, I guess just like high level or as detailed as you want, I don't care. Tell us like, how did you guys really kind of, I guess like where did the conversation around Flxpoint really kind of like begin?
Yeah, so just to look back in time, right? When I started with the company, we were very small, maybe 5 or 6 people. Our software had existed. Inventory Source, is around 16 years old now. So there's a lot of baggage that comes with that. We put in a lot of work to revamp it and kind of get it into a modern infrastructure, modern front end, just something that clients are actually happy to use and is providing the value that they were paying for and getting the product delivered that they wanted. However, Inventory Source had a kind of one size fits all solution for our customers, and we had dreams of wanting to provide all these feature sets and all this tooling to our customers, but we were hindered by the existing customer base, the existing product, and we struggled with the decision for a long time on whether or not we pivoted Inventory Source and we tried to bolt on to that existing product and make that what ultimately we wanted, like the vision we had for Flxpoint, or whether we needed to start from scratch. And so after a lot of debate and many months, we ultimately came to the decision that we needed to start from scratch because that was the only way to actually build the platform we envisioned. And also, for anyone listening who is in software, they'll understand this, but the best way I can put trying to change existing software is like, it's a car driving at 80 miles an hour. And you're like, I want to repaint it. I want to change the wheels and I want a bigger trunk. And like, you can't stop driving the car. The car has to keep going because the speed of the car is your existing customers that are already using the product. So to say like, we want this different car is really difficult because you can't stop it. You can't pull it over. There's no pit stops. There's no changing it. So after, realizing that, we embarked on the journey that was Flxpoint, and we learned a lot of lessons that carried us into from Inventory Source about making things, don't cookie cutter solutions for people and instead build a flexible product, hence the name Flxpoint, kind of where it came from. That would account for every single use case in the e-commerce space that someone could bring to it. Whereas Inventory Source said, you have one way to get to your solution. And if it's outside of those, sorry, it's just not going to work. So that was kind of the core MO of Flxpoint was build a product that can't, like, that has no use case it can't solve within the space and solution we're providing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you can't like pull over on the SaaS highway, right?
Yeah. So
You gotta like keep going.
that's one of my favorite analogies to provide to people, especially
Yeah.
that live in software, because it's a software system is a living, breathing, kind of like component, or like system of components, and you can't just change them and break them for all your existing customers. So
Yeah.
That's a really difficult part about software, is making wholesale changes to existing processes.
Yeah, for sure. As far as like, when you do talk about like decision making in general, right? Like, what do you think, maybe besides like deciding to just pivot completely and start from the ground up with Flexpoint, like within Flexpoint, when you guys, are building it out initially, like what do you think the best like tech decision that you guys made was, like in getting kind of there to like the point where, we went live in like 2019, I think, with the early adopters. So even like kind of like in the early stages, was there like any like one like, oh, I'm so glad we did this way. Thank God we decided to, not go the other route.
Yeah, I mean, there was like a plethora of decisions that kind of came there, but the biggest ones are really like the core frameworks and technologies that it's built on. So we use Aurora, which is an RDS, it's a relational database service provided by Amazon. And that allowed us to kind of scale our database needs, like as we've grown, and really high volume, high throughput database. That decision was really important. And then also the fundamental like kind of technologies that were built on are Spring and JOQ, which that's a way to interact with databases that, like, without that software in particular, a lot of the complexities of Flexpoint would be nearly impossible to develop, or would be much more error prone, buggy, and difficult to extend upon. Like if anyone here like listening has used Flexpoint, you know that we have our search screens with all the ability to filter on everything and create custom exports and do all this cool functionality. Like none of that would be possible, but very, very difficult without the software of JOQ. And then in addition to that, we use Vue, which is a JavaScript library on the front end, and it has been instrumental to our success. It really can't be understated how important it's been in building our user experiences and our UIs and keeping it simple and allowing multiple developers to kind of collaborate and work together on building good software.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I remember, it's kind of funny. It's like one of those things where it's like all of this is happening sort of behind the scenes that like the average everyday person isn't really aware of. And so I remember I'd come to you and
as an end customers you're just delivered products and experiences.
Yeah.
And you have no, you're not supposed to need to know about what decisions technically are being made behind the scenes to deliver those to you.
Yeah.
So there's hundreds of those decisions made all the time.
That's awesome. And that kind of explains, I would like come to you and Matt all the time and be like, well, why can't we just do it this way? And there's a lot more underneath that I think, you guys obviously consider that, me in sales or maybe somebody in customer success doesn't necessarily always see. But now that you're really kind of,
Real quick though, just to touch on, so in the software space, kind of back to the first question, like the fact that we decided to do a rebuild, most companies will tell you like that is like the kiss of death, and they will like it's not advised to do that. However, we are a success story in that regard, and
for sure.
We did like that development process was kind of like a black box of like 10 to 12 months of just heads down, me and Matt building out the entire product, or the initial like beta, So, and all of you guys were always like, everyone in the company is like, when do we get to see it? We're like, where is it at? Like, what's going on with it? And it's kind of just that backroom lab, mixing everything up and getting into that first phase. So just want to like touch on for listeners, like if you're thinking about, do I start a new product or do I change my own? Like make sure you make those decisions for the right reason, which I think we did.
Agreed. And I think I probably just said this, but just to kind of reiterate that too, I think we had more of an advantage because we had sort of a blueprint for like, here's what we don't want to do. here's what we want to do to kind of like achieve that, or to kind of
Yeah.
get to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, we had an existing, revenue stream through inventory source to kind of, we use that to fund the development. We also had, a handful of people with a decade plus in the e-commerce space with tons of knowledge, and all the things you should do, all the things you shouldn't do. So starting new projects with that kind of knowledge backing you, and also a revenue stream to kind of piggyback on, really is it can't be understated how important that is.
Yeah, that was huge for us. And so now, okay, I think we launched officially, right, with the early adopters back in like 2019. We officially changed the name from DMX to Flexpoint for legal reasons. No, I don't know. Because you would maybe get, I don't know. But so we did that. And then, really with the early adopters, we learned a lot, right? Like that first like iteration of Flexpoint, while like kind of, it's the same concept overall. There've been a lot of changes, and most of that was sort of from like those early adopters who really kind of helped us lay the groundwork and kind of build out the roadmap for future features we want to incorporate, making everything a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more user friendly. And so that kind of never stopped, which is I think for most SaaS companies ideal, right? Like you don't want to just release a product and say, okay, cool, enjoy, and then never continue to iterate on it, never to continue improving, never to continue releasing new features. So we're kind of doing that, all day, every day. But specifically, like recently, I know that you have been focusing more on like product growth now, right? We have Flexpoint. You're doing well in its like current state, but I know there's a lot that we want to continue expanding on. There's a lot of features we want to, add. And so now that you're sort of more in that role of like product growth, like tell me like if, product growth necessarily means, what does that mean to you, I guess, is the question.
So there's like two facets of product growth in my eyes. There's kind of like the nail your core competencies and like what the overall marketplace expects, right? Like make sure you have feature parity with your competitors, and just like ensure that whatever experiences are being delivered, are fully rounded out. So that's just like the capstones of like making sure your product is growing in the right ways.
Right.
And those like we put through a kind of like, we know all those things. Sometimes new ones come up, but we mainly have like the overall understanding of what all needs to be developed to like round out our product. And I see that as like, that's one side of growth. And that's kind of like the put your head down and just like, get it done side of growth. And then there's the other side of growth, which is how you kind of really differentiate your product and understand just like, what don't we have that customers don't even know they need, right? And that's where growth gets exciting, because you're actually thinking outside the box and saying like, even like, regardless of what our competitors are doing, what could we delight our customers with and really help give them a competitive advantage in their particular, like ecosystem or marketplace, or, whether it's fulfillment or listing side, whatever it is, the sky's kind of the limit. And like, that's the side of the growth that it gets me excited. And that I'm really focused on, like in today's landscape and world and the role I'm kind of shifting into. But yeah, those are the two areas of growth. And, so you have the standard, like make sure your system's doing what it's supposed to, and then don't drop the ball and become a dinosaur. Because, right, like you said, SaaS never stops. Like we're always, you have to keep improving, because it's such a competitive landscape in the SaaS world, that if you stop becoming better, then there's no real reason to stick with you or pick you over alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that too, because it's one thing for us to just be like better, faster, stronger in the space, right? It's another thing to be like innovative, right?
Yeah, to be differentiated and innovative. That's how you capitalize. Like obviously, reliability and cost, those are the foundational pillars. But the things that how you lure new customers in is by doing things in a way that they didn't think to do them, or provide them with tools that just make their life so much better that no one else can provide them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's super exciting. I'm super excited, obviously, to see, kind of where we go from here. I know there's the roadmap is complex, but it's exciting, right? There's a lot that we're looking to add and expand on.
It's one of those things where there's always ideas and there's a backlog, and there's only so many hours in a day, and it takes a long time to really build out proper features that are worth releasing. So yeah, it's exciting, and it's we got a lot of things that we want to release. It's just about prioritizing and starting to see them through.
Yeah. So I know the answer to this, obviously, because I've learned my lesson. But for everyone listening or maybe watching, what's the approach then, right? If someone comes to you with like a new feature request, how do you guys prioritize that in product council meetings? What's the overall questions that you guys are asking to kind of figure out how to prioritize features on the roadmap?
Yeah. So there's quite a few that go into that, but really, I mean, what it really comes down to is how many users are going to get the most value out of this, and how is it a game changer? Is it meeting requirements, right? Is it the left side of the growth that I talked about, just hit feature parity and make sure your product's doing the full life cycle of what's expected of it,
right?
Or is it something kind of out of the box and creative and would take us to another level? Flxpoint is complicated because we service a lot of different customer profiles, right? Maybe around 5. And so we tend to focus quarter by quarter on certain profiles and ensuring that we're delivering the best experience to them and kind of rounding them out.
Yeah.
So we could backlog an idea that's for one customer profile, but we're right now for the next 2 quarters, we want to stay focused here. So even though it may be a good idea, it may not be prioritized necessarily. But when a lot of things, because Flxpoint is so flexible, a lot of times something can come up and there's actually ways to kind of glue things in ways you wouldn't expect to get jobs done that you thought weren't possible already. And Flxpoint can actually already do it. It's just not as straightforward as you thought. So that's the step one. When someone comes to me with a feature request or something, I'm going to step back and go, can we not do something close to this already? How close can we already get? Can we hit the 80% of it? How important is the remaining 20%, et cetera? And then, beyond that, we have to kind of put it in frame of reference of there's only so many hours. There's lots of good ideas.
Right.
So is this going to help all of our customer base, or is it just for this one particular customer? What does it really look like as it evolves? There's a ton of questions there, and I'm not solely responsible for answering those. It's a team effort, but really we look at multiple data points there to decide what actually is what should be prioritized. It's not, there's no straightforward answer to that question though. It's kind of, there's some gut feeling, there's some market analysis, and then there's some this has to happen because everyone expects it to happen, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
Gotta look through each of those boxes and dig at it.
And so that kind of, you just mentioned, right, it's a group effort. I know Travis has talked about on some previous podcasts, Travis is our CEO, about the product council. Can you just touch on that a little bit? Let us know.
Yeah, the product council. So it's, I don't know if that's jargon or terminology or a process that other companies have. I'm sure they probably just have it for, in a different name. That's where we take kind of the core leadership of the company and we assess at-risk tasks and talk about what's going wrong here. Should we pivot? Should we pull this? Then also look at kind of requests that have been made by customers or ideas that we have. It's kind of just it's kind of it doesn't have a set structure so much. Yeah. It's kind of all of us just making sure that the distinct parts of the company are all in unison on some of the bigger initiatives and things we have going on. And also say we churned a big customer and we might all talk about why did this happen and could we build new processes to prevent this? So it's our brainstorming meeting of leadership to just kind of say is the ship sailing in the right direction and are we executing on the right things appropriately? Arguably
probably one of the most important meetings, I feel like, for sure.
Yeah. And it's it's always evolving. We're actually making some big changes to how we manage a lot of things right now, and that meeting might go away, but it'll just come back under a different name, really.
Yeah.
So, but you can't in a company you can't just operate in silos. You have to bring all the different disjoint parts of the company under one roof at some point in time each week or bi-weekly and just make sure everyone's cohesive. So
yeah. 100%. I feel like, some of like the best like features that we've released before have really kind of come from that like group think where it's a customer success manager mentioning, hey, I've got somebody who's requesting X. And then someone from sales even like chiming in saying like, yeah, I just ran a discovery and somebody, mentioned that they need the exact same thing. So it really is. And it's kind of like without that, group effort, you're working in silos. You kind of don't really know, what you don't really understand, I guess, the direction of the product, right? You don't really understand where you're headed if you guys aren't all on the same page. So yeah, I think that the product council and then all I can think of really is the meme that I think Travis put together. I'll have to see if I can find it.
Is it the owl?
I don't know.
I
No,
see the owl meme where it's like, it's an outline. It's like how to draw an owl, like draws the circles. And then it's like, all of a sudden it's just like, draw the owl. And like, it
just draw the rest of it.
Yeah, with incredible detail and everything. It's just like, just do it. But there's a process in there.
Yeah, 100%. So knowing that there's a process, right? Knowing that you guys like have laid the groundwork and the foundation for, a lot of good stuff. What would you, and I don't want to say like if time travel existed, I actually had that written in my notes. So we know time travel doesn't exist. We did actually just bring on 2 new interns though. So maybe not like what piece of advice would you give like Brad from 5 years ago, but what piece of advice would you give, like, let's say like the new interns or kind of the new guys coming onto the scene, when you first started building Flxpoint?
I don't know if I particularly have I have advice I'd like to give myself. That advice would vary from advice I'd give to an intern. So I'll give the advice I wish I gave to myself. Probably.
Okay. Well, let's pretend time travel existed. We'll do that.
Yeah. And they're a bit more technical. One is we actually just had, unfortunately, a pretty, one of our largest tech incidents we've had to date, which, we've publicized it. You can go read the postmortem on it, anyone listening to this. But when we built our database, our primary keys were integers. And what happens is integers have a max value in the 2 billion range. And we actually hit those max values on some of our tables, and they had relationships all over the place. So that could have been easily avoided by just not using integers and using what's called big integers, which basically the limit is like you'll never be able to reach them. So if I go back in time and like rewrite our database with all of those, we could have prevented a massive amount of headaches. So that's one. And then the other is we didn't start our development process with an API first focus, which is now like we've been putting in lots of work over the last year and a half, which you go look at our API docs, they're really good now. You can pretty much anything you can do inside our app, you can do via our API. At first, those were all kind of black box processes and they weren't exposed via a public API. They were just internal APIs that weren't documented. Now we're basically anything that a customer uses through our API is the same thing we use. So that it's getting like the utmost quality and attention and like QA on it. So if I could go back in time and make it where we didn't ever write those internal APIs and only wrote in our public API, we would have saved ourselves a massive amount of energy and time. Great. So those 2, and then I feel like I have one more, but it's eluding me right now.
I will say though, our API docs, and obviously. Again, from, maybe a sales rep's point of view or, customer success point of view, you kind of initially probably think like, oh, all APIs are the same, right? They're all created equal, and they're really not. And I know that Matt, our CTO, has put literally his like heart and soul and has gotten almost no sleep while he was building that out, creating the docs for all of that too. So yeah, if you guys have a chance and if that's something you're interested in checking out, I don't know, maybe I'll post the link somewhere for everybody to see that.
Yeah, I'd say for being a SMB, our API is some of the best you can find in our headcount company. Obviously once you go to companies like Stripe and Shopify and these big dogs, they have, incredible APIs with incredible documentation. We're a limited team with limited amount of resources, but I will say that, we can pat ourselves on the back and say that it's quite nice.
So knowing that that's the advice you give yourself, right? Integers and, API first.
Yeah.
What about the interns question then? Is there anything that you would kind of advise them if you haven't already?
Really, it's just don't, whatever like preconceived notion you think, like anytime you think you're right, you're probably not. And like you just
Yeah.
like you will be right, but it's like really when you're at that stage in your career, you just want to be a vacuum and you just want to suck up every bit of knowledge around you, and don't be hard-headed and like ignorant and think that you already know it all. Because I mean, I was guilty of that when I was in my early 20s. Every young 20-year-old thinks they're the hottest thing to ever live, and that they know everything, and that they shouldn't have to listen to anybody. Honestly, that's the worst. That's the worst place to be in, and just being an open book and like a vacuum, and just sucking up all the knowledge and all the hard work that people have laid the foundations in companies. And that's whether from tech or just process structure, management. Just look at all of it and suck it all, because if you ever want to run your own company, they're all things you're going to have to deal with. So that's my biggest piece of advice.
For sure. And I would say that applies to 10-year-olds too, because Connor, he also thinks that
well, it really should apply to all of us all the time. We should never stop learning, and when you're right, but you don't ever operate on the pretense that you can't be wrong. So
100%. And there's always somebody who, would probably do things a little bit different than you, could probably suggest a better way. And so why not take advantage of, especially like being around guys like you and Matt and the rest of the team. Super valuable. So, all right. So what software component has had the most impact, do you think, on Flxpoint as a product?
So, early, like with the way IS was, is you kind of had to tell inventory source, like we gave you a preset of like, mark a product up by this percentage or this dollar amount, right? And like that's a fixed solution that you can't escape, and it's only in one spot. And so when we started building Flxpoint, we realized that like we can't make these decisions and cover every use case for how you might want to modify data or change it as it's flowing through the system. So there's kind of two elements that have synergy with each other, and that's the mapping templates and our workflow engine. So the workflow engine basically is a set of no-code tools, which everyone listening's probably kind of heard the term no-code. It's basically coding in a UI like environment where you can tell it how to manipulate or do anything you want. So we have a whole set of no-code tools, which we call our workflow engine, which allows you to manipulate and manage and change data in all sorts of ways that you can. It's like a big Lego box, and you can just manipulate everything as much as you want.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And that plus that sits at the heart of our entire system, along with mapping templates. Because mapping templates, for anyone listening, what that really is it's just a way to say, like, I'm getting data from Shopify. Like, how do I want to ingest that into Flxpoint, right? Rather than us saying we always pull it in this way, you're actually in charge of saying, I want this to go here, and I want to run rules to manipulate it before it gets pulled in. So those two fundamental like software components and principles of ways of thinking about, like, not always like not defining how someone should do something or how it should be done, really is what made Flxpoint what it is today. It can't be understated how important those two components have been in shaping what Flxpoint is and how it's used.
Yeah, I think 100%. And I think, like, the challenge for, us when it comes to like requesting certain features, it's kind of always that, like you mentioned, that initial, approach of, well, can we already solve this? Right. We have this like wildly flexible tool that can solve like a million different use cases. And it's like really kind of understanding exactly what the feature request is and determining, like, hey, we could probably already do that, or we probably can't do that. It's kind of like that first step, right? And kind of, defining what new features we're going to be adding. And I think, from my perspective in sales, when I'm speaking to users, I mean, we have, a number of different users with a number of different personas. We work with, retailers, like traditional retailers. We work with brands, we work with distributors, and it's really it's all because of that, right? It's not this sort of like in the box solution. This is what you get, figure it out on your own. It's, hey, we're giving you all of these tools. We're giving you all of these, the mapping templates. We're giving you the workflows, and we're kind of allowing you to decide how you want to use it. Right. And so I think I think you're spot on. The mapping templates and the workflow engine are really kind of Flxpoint, right? Like that is Flxpoint.
Yeah, that is it. It is the heart and soul of Flxpoint. Everything is built kind of around those. And in addition to that, like we define like core operations, and like the fact that we don't tie, like, you might get data from Shopify, but you want to send your POs to, pick one of the platforms. It's like the fact that those aren't coupled together, and that you can mix and match all the different ways, like FTP or EDI, and all of that can be combined within one kind of like, warehouse, is like also tremendously flexible for, and what we provide. And like, just thinking of like one of the use cases too, like, we've been asked a lot about like Amazon repricers, and it's like, well, technically we can't do that, but we can generate you a file which you can drop on an FTP that's picked up by pick any number of the Amazon repricer tools out there, and there you go, you get it for free. So it's like, that's one of those things where it's like, we want this. Well, it's like, well, could we leverage another third-party provider that like we can just drop them data already, and then it would basically close the loop and like get it done for you? So lots of like interesting ways to be able to kind of mix and match everything because of how flexible the whole system is.
For sure.
Yeah.
Last question. We're going to wrap up here. But this has kind of been in sort of like those early years, like building out Flxpoint or DMX. We always kind of had this, we'd come to you with like a feature request or a need that we'd get from, a user. And really it was, like you mentioned before, when you are like evaluating a new feature, you want to make sure it's something that, is kind of requested across the board from multiple users. It's something that's going to provide value to the overall product and experience. But all of that to say, we used to joke all the time, like, well, you guys can do this, right? Because anything is possible with code.
Yeah.
So my question is, Brad, is anything truly possible with code? And if so, what's like one, like if you could like create, or I'm sure maybe you have already, but if you could maybe like create your own app or your own piece of software, just sort of as like a side hustle or a side project, what would that be?
Okay, is anything possible with code? I used to think no, but nowadays I'm thinking more and more yes. Like we don't have real AI yet. We only really have like everyone marketed, like AI is a marketing pitch, used by managers and salespeople, because there is no true like sentient like AI. We just have like machine learning. But I do think that once we can maybe create like a biological computer that mimics the brain, that like really anything is possible with code, because like we are essentially just like our genetics are code, if you think about it. So it's really like, is code running through a CPU capable of anything? Probably not. But like in terms of like, if we abstract that away and think like, can sets of instructions make anything possible? Yes, I think so.
Interesting.
And then you asked if I could build anything. So, before this, I had a handful of software companies before joining with inventory source, eventually Flxpoint. And I'm a, avid surfer and kiteboarder. So watching weather is like, kind of what I do all the time when I'm not coding, because I'm constantly want to know if I can go surf or kiteboard. And I actually had a surf forecasting website prior to this. I won't mention the name, but if I could, I would go rebuild a like global weather surf forecasting and kiteboarding app. It would look a lot like I almost don't want to do it because there's already one out there that basically is everything I'd want to build. And it's called windy.com.
Yeah.
If anyone listening hasn't heard of that, go check it out. It's going to blow your mind. But yeah, that's really like, because the two things I think about are our company and our space, and then surfing and kiteboarding. So it's like, really, there's not room for much else in there. That's really all I think.
It's one or the other.
Yeah, it's one or the other. So outside of what we're already doing, that would basically be it.
That's awesome. You should go for it.
No, there's not enough time to go for it for me.
One day.
Yeah,
one day for sure. Well, Thank you so much for your time. I'm super pumped that you agreed to come on. I wasn't sure if you were going to look at me a little bit crazy when I asked you to.
No, I enjoyed it, and I'd be happy to do it again. So in the future, it's
For sure. We'll definitely have you back. But till then, I'll see ya.
all right.
All right, guys, thanks again so much for tuning in to another Modern Merchant podcast episode. If you want to learn more about us, check us out at flexpoint.com. That's Flexpoint without the E.com. We've got our Modern Merchant blog up there. It's full of the latest e-commerce information and news. Also, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on socials at Flexpoint. We'll see you again next week with another episode.